Hello, visibility enthusiasts. Welcome to the Beyond Visibility Lounge, the podcast that explores the seen and unseen world of the supply chain, logistics, transportation, and traceability. I'm your host, Ilariana Caccianico.
And I'm your co-host, Ron Volpe.
And together, we are on a mission to inspire collaborative visibility innovations in the future. In today's episode, we'll delve into the complexities of tracking goods movement from seller to the buyer. In the realm of supply chains, the ability to monitor the transit of goods is a pivotal aspect of visibility. To put this into perspective, let's consider our own experiences with air travel. When we fly, airlines track us from the moment we book our flight till the completion of the journey. They use a passenger name record, the PNR, the 6-character confirmation number that is assigned to us at the moment of booking, and then it amalgamates our personal and itinerary details together. This way, the PNR facilitates seamless connectivity across various service providers, ensuring a smooth journey for us all. However, when it comes to goods movement, the scenario is starkly different.
Supply chains involve numerous intermediaries beyond just the buyer and seller of the final product. Unlike the airline industry, where a PNR follows our entire journey, supply chain load transportation lacks a universally accepted identification system that would take place even before the journey of the goods movement has begun. This shortage makes automation and tracking extremely challenging. Our guest today has been motivated by this very challenge. Michael Darden, the founder and CEO of the DFM Data Corp, has introduced a groundbreaking solution, the Transportation Unit Identifier, or TUID. This innovation's beauty lies in its simplicity, yet the challenge remains in achieving broad industry adoption amidst significant fragmentation.
We are thrilled to have Michael join us today. With 40 years of experience, he has been captivated by the orchestration of goods movement, dedicating his career to leveraging actionable data for process improvements. His tenure includes leading roles at Coca-Cola and pioneering digital freight matching with Power to Ship. In 2019, he founded the DFM Data Core to usher the fragmented North American ground transportation industry into the freight tech revolution. Recognizing the challenges posed by the outdated systems, the company is spearheading a collaborative approach to embrace digital technologies and standardize communication across the network.
So let's dive into the conversation with Michael and explore this transformative approach to supply chain management.
Michael Darden, thank you very much for joining Beyond Visibility Lounge and being our guest and agreeing to come and share an ounce of your wisdom about supply chains, visibility, and tracking. As with every other conversation, we really love to start the conversations with understanding the journey that each one of us went through to get to where we are right now. So why don't you start by sharing how did you grow professionally to found the DFM Data? And then you can also share about the TUID, the core topic that got us together today.
Sure. So my journey in the world of supply chain management started very young in Long Island, New York, with my uncle's auto parts store. But professionally, I'd say the piece when I really got into logistics management or supply chain management was in the '96 Olympics, where I was hired in '95 to be able to start preparing for an event that was going to happen in August of '96, and got involved in the planning of all of the new distribution paths that were going to be there to support the consumption of Coca-Cola product in places where it hadn't been consumed before. So I got to manage the distribution of all of those vending machines to 57 different venues and make new supply lines for that transition. And they referred to it as my MBA in logistics. It was literally taking a project from what really wasn't going to be handled very effectively by the bottling network and handling it inside of a new entity that was formed as Coca-Cola Olympic Operations. And I was the operations manager of that job.
So what inspired the idea behind the Transportation Unit Identifier, TUID, and what were the key challenges you faced in its conceptualization?
So the inspiration behind the TUID goes back a long ways, back to about 2004. I was working as the president of a logistics company where we were looking to build digital freight matching capabilities early on. And when we were writing the specification for this, we referred to something called a shipment identification number, and that it kind of needed to be unique. You needed to have a way to be able to reference that transaction. And we concatenated a couple of fields together to be able to make it so that it was unique inside of our system. But it was a recognition early on in the development of software in this space that identifiers were going to be a challenge if there were lots of different marketplaces and fragmentation in the industry. So the early stage was there's going to be a problem here, and everybody kind of started to solve it on their own of, well, I got to make my own identifier and I'm going to make it like this. But there really wasn't a standard for it. And back in 2016, 2017, I started to see a growth in the number of digital freight matching marketplaces and realized that they were going to have this interconnectivity problem where if Procter and Gamble has a list of 25 loads and they put it in 4 different marketplaces, it looks like 100 loads that need to be moved and there's only 25 of them. And as soon as Procter and Gamble would get their ones moved, they don't take any more phone calls, but the other marketplaces are giving bad experiences. And that was my motivator of going, well, there's the conditions that I considered way back in 2004 of if there were lots of these marketplaces, there would be this need for a unique shipment identifier that we were going to be coming upon a convergence point. And I reached out for a PhD professor friend of mine that I've worked with for about 10 years and shared with him the problem of trying to eliminate phantom data. And he worked with me to be able to produce a calculation from a sampling of data of what we could remove of phantom information by using origin, destination, zip code pairs and timestamps and some reference numbers that were built into the transaction. And the best we would be able to do would be to get to about 85% of removal of duplicity. And if you came up with a shipment identification number at the very beginning, you would be precise in the transaction ID and allow for the 100% alignment of unique identifiers. So that became our challenge of how do we produce that TUID?
And that was great. And I think you've sort of answered my follow-up question, but I'll ask it anyway. So how did you validate the potential impact and feasibility within the industry as you went through this project?
So the first part of it was I paid really close attention to this of what was happening in the digital freight matching space, and I really cataloged the industry and have actually built it so that it's represented on my website. The DFM Data website has an industry articles tab that literally is 122 pages long of every article from the origination of digital freight matching up till current, and really evaluated how this and when the timing of this was going to take place. In addition to that, we did get some additional data sources of raw transportation data and looked for what the collision was, how you could create those colliders that were meaningful. But I'll tell you what was really interesting is when we did this initial research of this data set, not only were we identifying, that we could get to about 85% of this removed, the flip side of the equation was introduced, where there were some transactions that looked like duplicates, but they really weren't duplicates. They were truly 2 different shipments that had similar or the same sort of attributes, and you couldn't tell them as being unique shipments because there wasn't an intentional ID that was created for it. So we had the delta on one side of the equation of about 15% that we'd never be able to solve for. And then we were introducing another 7 to 10% worth of problems. And it was like, this is primed for having a standard. This is that time when you go, okay, the world is bigger than just me and we're all going to have the same problem. And how do we fix this? And the way you fix it is you don't try to make money on it. You figure out how to be able to make it so it can work for everybody and that they can produce it on their own. And you work through the standards organizations to be able to say, is there anything else out there that could do this job? And as soon as everybody looks and says that there isn't, then you go, there's a hole, there's a gap. We at the creation of this digital effort, we didn't make a standard for the identifier.
Super interesting. Thank you.
We are going to share the link to the white paper with podcast notes, but before our audience still reads the paper, can we explain to them how would TUID, Transportation Unit Identifier, look like, the way that you are advocating?
Sure. So when we first looked at creating this unique identifier, like I said, we tried to use attributes of the transaction, like the zip code of the origin and the zip code of the destination, or even the mailing address number that's before the street address. And you just end up with so many random elements that are in there that make it so it's really hard to concatenate that in a useful and meaningful way. And when we picked certain elements, like the EIN number from when you register with your tax ID, and you added that to a zip code of where you're located, you could get pretty close to what a unique identification creation is, but wasn't really precise. And when I talk about precise, I mean like a GPS coordinate is 10 digits by 10 digits to be able to have the longitude and latitude. And to be able to generate that number and that level of precision is going to get you within a meter of space. And when you talk about, here's the mailbox outside of a warehouse that's in the middle of an island that the truck passed to be able to get to that, that's not the address anymore, right? The mailbox is not giving me what dock door is where your receiving is. The dock door location, longitude, latitude, is literally a precise location. So this identifier in its production, instead of using those random elements that we had considered early on, we when speaking to ECMA and the ISO organization, they showed us that there was an existing standard for time and date stamp. And we went, all right, so what's that? And it's called ISO 8601. And it is a means of being able to take the year, then the month, then the day, then the hour, then the minute, then the second, then the millisecond. So you're going from largest unit of measure down to smallest unit of measure, and you're ordering them such that you're generating a specific length character of the timestamp of when the order is generated for shipment. The next field after that is the origin location and then the destination location. And instead of using that 20-digit character for the GPS, we realized that the GPS could be coordinated to an ISO standard that is called the Natural Location Identifier. And it takes that 20-digit GPS coordinate and converts it down to a 14-digit alphanumeric character that's much easier for human beings to be able to type in and to be able to search and research. But it's truly a conversion of GPS coordinates down to this number, and from this number back to a GPS coordinate. So you could literally identify with this mechanism of the TUID the time and date stamp when it's available, the origin location, exactly the dock that it's on, the destination of the exact dock that you want it to go to, and then who owns the transaction and what's their reference number. And it puts together a series of this identifier that starts as being a minimum of 50 characters, which is your entire address fields for origin and destination and timestamp of when it's ready to move, which by itself is unique. So it is basically a 50-digit automatic, globally unique identifier for any transaction moving from anywhere to anywhere else on the globe. And then the last portion of that transport unit identifier is the authoritative identifier of the company, Procter & Gamble or Kraft or Heinz or Coca-Cola or whoever that company is, and their identifier. And what you end up with is a string of characters that to the right of those characters that aren't going to change throughout the time of the entire transaction is the ability to add a suffix of who's changing and updating the status of this identifier through its lifespan. And instead of sending faxes with copies of bills of lading that are partially produced or updates of information from a screenshot of what's on a website, you actually have a lineage of who started it, what was planned, where was it supposed to go, and then when did I cross each one of those milestones in the execution phase.
I'm really amazed with, I want to call it the simplicity of this innovation, because while it combines several elements, the core elements, the time, the origin, the destination, the entity that is making the purchase, it is simplifying such a complexity in the industry.
Nobody's ever tried to do it before, Ileana. It's like when I first saw it, I was like, "Oh my God, this is what unlocks the interconnectivity and interoperability of the marketplaces without sharing every field of information, without building a custom interface to if I tell you the sensor piece of what status it's at and you know me and I'm giving you then you can act on that information of hitting the milestone. You don't necessarily need to know the step next to it. And if you do, then that's part of what the requirements are that you put in the planning phase to say, in order to qualify for this, you're going to have to give me updates during the execution phase of status movements of where the shipment is while it's in transit or while it crosses these milestones. And I think that's one of the things that's really missing from our current logistics day is you got somebody who's saying, I got a load going from Minneapolis to Atlanta. And that's just not precise enough. And when is it ready? Well, it's ready right now. Is right now right now? I mean, if I literally have a truck that's at your location, is it really ready or is it ready in 6 hours from now? And I think when we standardize on these fields of, when is it ready? Where is it at? Where is it going? Who owns it? And what's their number? That's pretty much all you need to know to be able to find out any level 2 results. If I knew that in a status, I'm pretty good.
What I'm fascinated with is that the innovation that it is. It is not a product. It is not a service. As you said, it is not a new interface. It is not a new platform. It is simply an innovative way of naming the load and attaching to that naming the events and the stakeholders and the critical moments of that load's journey from origin to the destination. What I'm curious to know about, to learn from you is, as with a lot of different kind of innovative solutions, what are the challenges that you foresee in its wider adoption?
So I would say the primary obstacles are of widespread adoption is human beings. Change management. I have a belief from other history that I have dealt with autism and Asperger's in my life that there's like 5 A's, the letter A to behavior change. And the first is awareness. The second is acceptance. The third is appreciation. The fourth is adoption. And the fifth is advocacy. And it's really a journey until you know that there is a TUID that enables for you to communicate with everybody else in your supply chain what to do, that you can't begin the acceptance journey. So there's a sequence of having an awareness and then acceptance and then an appreciation of how is this going to change my world? What is this going to do in my business? How is it going to impact my trading relationships? And then adoption is that commitment that a change is going to begin, and the advocacy is to be able to share it with your trading partners, to be able to make it so that everybody can collaborate and uniformly adopt a way to be able to communicate that simplifies a very challenging problem.
Michael, one of the things I hear when you talk about this parallels some of the work that I'm involved in the traceability space, which is increasingly the expectation is for greater granularity around how we're tracking and what we're tracking. So the parallel for me is, we've gone from truckloads to boxes to individual cell units, and increasingly regulation is mandating that happen in industry. So the work you're doing clearly dovetails with the work that I see on my side as well. One of the questions I have is around other things that you've been able to adapt your solution to, and how you envision deriving other value from the implementation of TUID.
Yeah, it's been an interesting part of the journey to be able to have really smart and experienced logistics and technology people try to come up with the exceptions. Yeah, but if we did it what happens when you do? And at the end of the day, to be able to harden a solution like this, it has to be simple to understand, but it also has to be able to take the attack of all of those other different situations of what do you do when this happens? What do you do when it's dry bulk that's moving? What do you do when it's wet bulk that's moving? What when it's a pipeline? I mean, there's a lot of examples that can come up that you have to think your way through and understand that they are the exception, but it's important to be able to make sure that the standardization process goes through that rigor of having the input from those people that may be commercially opposed to having this there. It may make it more difficult for them to have the competitive solution that they bring to the market today because they're thriving in the fact that there isn't clear visibility of what's going on. And those folks sometimes are opposed to being able to have adoption of regulation or standards to be able to come into the space. And what the challenge is to be able to really identify what is the least common denominator for updating of information? What are the essential data elements to be able to move and leave room for the specialization that each of these differentiated vendors built for their existing customers? We don't have a competitive advantage to try to be able to bring them in and have it so that we're servicing them. This is just a mechanism for being able to standardize the who am I doing business with? How has their identifier been verified so that I don't have fraudulent transactions at either the buyer or the carrier or the intermediary level? And all of them are currently exposure points. But when we start communicating an identifier with a known status from a known party to a known party, you eliminate that. You don't allow unknown parties in. You only allow parties that have credentialized and validated their ability to be able to update the information, much like the Flow Initiative does. You know, there's the Andrew Peterson has built that so that it is collaborative and based off of inputs from the users, and those inputs users are being validated through consistent updates of that data. And when you know who you're doing business with and they know they're being measured, they will police themselves harder than anybody else from the external world is going to do so.
Just a follow-up question to that. So in the work you've done and the progress you've made, have you been able to translate that into new predictive modeling algorithms that have been developed to support the business?
So there's a lot of room for that expansion that happens. And I mean, it's a great question. The monetization side of the new world that this will look like with artificial intelligence and machine learning and different, modeling exercises that are now becoming more and more commonplace, that there's only improved accuracy of the ingestion of information that produces a better identifier and update. And there's still some mechanics of being able to have the who are you doing business with, but the future states of being able to analyze like what improvement looks like, it's the same algorithm that's been used in about every single industry that's out there. It's literally just applying the variables that are in this industry's view of what was promised and what was delivered into a better visualization than we're accustomed to being able to see right now. And I don't think we get standardized enough inputs to be able to produce standardized enough outputs. And that's where I think the real innovation of the TUID is going to be, is because not only can you do it from today going forward, but it's an algorithmic representation of an identifier. You could literally go to your entire history and apply a TUID and status change mechanism to what did take place and have it so that you now have a standardized ingestion for modeling to take place. So whereas now in most of these data scientist roles, the first job for them to do is to clean the data and normalize the data, you've already done that if you can take the data into an identifier that's meaningful, that also identifies when status changes occurred. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Michael, recently the International Standards Organization published a new project in the Technical Committee for Supply Chain about application of ISO 8001:15, the standard to Transportation Unit Identifiers. Can you share for our audience, what does it mean, or what does this mean for the wider adoption of the TUID that you are advocating for?
Well, so it's a huge step, Ariana. The first, I'll give just a little bit of history of kind of what happened here. I mean, my friend Dr. Viku Zamari, when I asked him to be able to look at how we could solve this, and we came up with this 86% thing, the alternative to that was, let's see what a TUID, a transport unit identifier, would look like. And we theorized a couple of ways that it could be done, and we proposed some things that we thought were third or fourth best ways for it to be able to happen, so that we could get feedback from comments of others that said, hey, but you could really do it like this. And ECMA, the organization that's called Electronic Commercial Code Management Association, they reached out for us as the authors of the paper and said, so we have these other ISO elements that are already in the process of becoming standards, and if we used those elements, then you would literally be concatenating elements of ISO standards to make a new ISO standard. This will literally be, no one will oppose this, because it's literally, these four standards are already out here, and we're just saying we have a method to put these four elements together, and we have a method to be able to produce those to an ISO standard. This is a new standard using those things. And when they proposed it to that way to me, I was like, well, that seems to make a lot of sense. And there's, this suffix that's at the end of it, that's this status change, this goods movement process that goes along with the transport unit identifier. And they were like, not sure that we're going to be able to support what that is. We do identifiers. We can do that. We're really good at that. But the status change thing sounds like it's much more like what industry would want, and where the natural milestones would be between them. So our work with ASTM really put us in a place of being able to say we could address those goods movement process statuses, but to reference the TUID as saying, here's the identifier, here's your statuses from two different standards development organizations, is quite an accomplishment to be able to harmonize the two different standards bodies to be able to address the need of an identifier and an updated status. So the fact that there is now a ISO 8000-119 TUID page that is an official ISO referenceable page in its route to become a official international standard means that ASTM can reference it, and it can reference ASTM, and they can literally progress into the industry, bringing ISO correlating standards as well as ASTM correlating standards. So big step. Just it just happened last week, so I'm still kind of absorbing what it really means to be able to have it out there. I mean, it's been 2 years of work that really nobody gets to see, and nobody knows what took place for it, and there's nobody paying me to go do it. And at the end of the day, you come back and they say, well, this is a really great idea. It's a huge problem in the industry, and we should write an international standard about it. And that's a humbling experience, that you go, wow, this is global and it's needed, and I saw it and I could help, and here to help. That's what I've been trying to be able to solve this problem for a long time. The work for ASTM started in October of 22, and it really focused on the fact that between this booking or posted and pre-booked stage, and between pre-booked and booked, and between booked and en route, there's these events that happen between them. And those things are things where we need kind of the industry to be able to come in and say, that's important to me. I need to know about that because of blah, 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 blah. And we just need to go, yep, that's where it goes. It goes between this one and that one, and it's somewhere there. We call it a number and what fields go with it. But there wasn't a framework of what are those milestone steps that happen on every single shipment. And we laid out, initially this this series of statuses that occur in a sequential manner in any transaction, whatever it is. And the details that are between those steps, you could have variances in there. You could have variances in there all day long. But the step itself, when it's left, it's left. When it's delivered, it's delivered. It's not like there's a question of whether it happened. It's the things that we chose in the development of the standard are steps that you don't go back from. Once they're done, they're done. And you can tell everybody else that they're done because they really can't do anything to influence it anymore. It's a status update. This thing occurred as it was supposed to, or this thing occurred a little bit ahead of time, or it occurred a little bit afterwards. But if you become expectant on knowing what you're going to get and when you're going to get it, you can catch more of your flights. You can show up and get your bags to be able to be at the airport when you're on the other side. You can get a first class upgrade. You can start to work the system when you understand what all the levers are. And right now, we've got customized levers in multiple hundreds of marketplaces, and they don't talk to each other very well. So this is, Irliana's focused on this interoperability committee, and it's an essential part of what the motivation is of this TUID work is to let's get the things we can agree upon. Start there.
Michael, you're highlighting so many interesting points, and earlier you also mentioned the one of the core values of many that will derive from the TUID's ability to analyze and have predictable analytics for the businesses, and that leads me in a way to the next question, which I want to hear from you. When it comes to the innovation in the future based on TUID, who do you think will be the primary customers of those innovations? And how do we work with those customers so we drive adoption?
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting place with regulation at the moment. I mean, we've got players that are out there as digital marketplaces that currently don't have any regulation. There's no guidelines for how they're supposed to conduct business, and they can choose to claim themselves as a broker or as a digital platform that's enabling transactions to take place with customers that they serve on both sides. But at the end of the day, when you read the definition of the Federal Maritime Commission for what a shipping exchange is, they're all going to have to register with the Shipping Exchange Registry from the Federal Maritime Commission. And they're all going to have to follow the rules and the regulations that will reference the standards for how to be able to comply. And it's a complex, left, right step to be able to get to where the finish line is. But I think the finish line here is a hybrid of the federal government doesn't want to tell everybody this is how you should commercially do business, but they do want to set the guardrails to be able to make it so that the way that they're conducting business is within the parameters that everybody else is willing to be able to do business with. And I think we're going to see those regulations harden over the next several years. We're going to see tighter controls with the compliance of who is driving the truck, what licensing do they have, what safety regulations have been checked, and who is it that I'm doing business with. And this fraud push that has really, made the headlines over the past 6 months, 8 months is the downside of digitizing too fast without structure. You got everybody's digital information sent in copy out to everybody. And then as soon as you can't make the same margin you were making before, it's too easy to steal and go away and start another thing before you could get caught. And that has really damaged the industry. It's damaged the reputation of being able to work in a brokering environment where there's expectation of transparency and there's no enforcement of transparency. And I think when the FMCSA tightens that notch down on their enforcement side to improve safety, and the FMC steps in with their definition and requirement for registry, you're going to see industry go, oh yeah, I want to be in compliance. I've always wanted to be in compliance. It's easy to be in compliance. I'm just in compliance. But they're not going to do that until they know that there is the threat that the knock on the door can come today or tomorrow from the FMC to be able to say, I've had complaints about the fact that you haven't provided transparency on your broker transactions, and I'm here to audit you. And they have the right to be able to do that, and they haven't executed that before. But when we're trying to be able to get down to the granular level of DOT looking at the flow initiative of what the demand side is and needing Homeland Security to be able to track the movement of goods across our country and who's doing that, you have an aligned interest that the federal regulation is going to bring to industry and ask industry to be able to comply.
So I hear you, and we cannot deny the impact of the regulation. And I totally agree with you. We need more regulation, especially when it comes to data exchange, data security, to facilitate the interoperability. And I really hope that flow is just the starting point. The freight and logistics optimization works initiative, because it does demonstrate a lot of values of collaboration. But while this driver can come from the regulation, can we expect the driver for transparency and efficiency to come from the market as well? And if from the market, where do you see the primary drivers could be for higher transparency, and that means supply chain visibility, and that also translates to adoption of the methods like TUID that can facilitate this interoperability, this collaboration, and that ultimately transparency for all stakeholders involved?
So I think the shipper side of this as a driver is really important. And it's important for shippers to be able to realize that a TUID is generated at the very first intention to ship. And because it's at that very first intention to ship, any order that you are either fulfilling for someone else or you are asking someone else to fulfill for you should have a TUID generated for it. It is able to be demanded by any shipper to any third-party provider because they already have all of the information that's required. And just like ISO 9000 certification, if you ask someone, are you ISO 9000 certified? And they go, no, then you introduce them to ISO 9000. And you say, these are the standards to be able to conduct business. And this is the way I request and require formatted data to do business with my orders. And what DFM Data's role is in this exchange and changeover from this is how I do it with my own identifier that goes through these other iterations of other identifiers is to be able to help make that viral effect of this is my network. This is how I do business. It's not hard to be able to do this. Let me explain to you how it works. I'll handle it this time, but next time I need you to have an identifier and to format your order in this way. And with some time and some change management and some acceptance and some encouragement, that becomes the norm in the transaction. And I don't think you want to be able to say effective, June 1st, everybody has to be able to transition to a TUID. But I think you could probably lay out a change management plan with your vendors that identified that there is this ISO 8000 standard that will enable us to communicate more precisely with each other. And in order to be able to achieve a higher level of service to our customers, we're asking you to adopt the ISO methodology of being able to standardize our transport unit identifiers and to communicate with our trading partners with updates at regular milestone steps. And it's not a hard ask. I'm asking you to do this. And if you're willing to keep my business and to be able to support me, that request coming from a shipper is very, very meaningful. They will start to look at who is doing business with quality portable master data and who's just sending over their garbage data for me to be able to try to be able to work my way through. Which do you want to do? Do you want to be the one that's easy to do business with, or the one that I got to be able to go through some matriculation of what your number is to what my number is to what your customer's number is to what my customer's number is to be able to make sure we're talking about the same thing?
Michael, new technologies like blockchain and AI are playing an increasingly significant role in providing supply chain visibility. I'd be really interested in hearing your views on advancements on the technology front.
I really like the immutability of blockchain. Mostly between the execution and settlement phase. I think in the planning and then the negotiation phase, there's some flexibility that's still there, some arrangements, some give and take that happens at that part of what the expectations are. But the immutability of blockchain in the settlement phase is really useful to compare to what happened during the execution phase, to be able to have it so that you're not arguing over pennies for things that were important or big dollars even. I mean, it's accurate information that's immutable. I think the capabilities of functions like AI to be able to collect information from, fixed pictures of information or fixed pictures or scans and PDFs of data and extract that data at a 99% accuracy rate, as opposed to what was a 60% accuracy rate from, historical ocular recognition tools, I think is a huge improvement. But honestly, I'm a little afraid of some of the capabilities of what AI can do with an untrained or undertrained model to be able to use information. And, it's asked to fill in the blanks of information with what it doesn't know. And when you start asking a computer to fill in blanks of what's there, there's a lot of blanks there. And it'll start making stuff up that it thinks you want to be able to hear and cite a reference that you think you want to be able to have cited. And there is no paper that said that with that person. And it's extrapolating without a proper set of rules and safeguards. It's a scary, slippery slope to be able to release out to a set of, untrained, uncertified, unethical, sometimes, developers that really are just looking to be able to maximize the profit for the company without recognizing what the input on the user and the customer is. And I'm a big believer in ethics in the development cycle, and have consulted with and done some webinars with some experts that are in that ethics space, because at the end of the day, that's all you got is your reputation. And I know people that play the reputation game to be able to harm and make it so that others can't be successful because of what their messaging is. And it's shameful. And there's a place where that reconciliation will take place that's above my pay grade. So I just try to keep doing the right thing and make it so that these technologies can have a real, genuine, positive impact on the quality of life of people that are having to be able to normalize data before calculations can be done. It just seems silly that we have a whole generation of data scientists whose job is to be able to look at data sets and look for irregularities because we didn't standardize it on the way in.
Michael, it has been a great pleasure to host you. Just before we let you go, is there any question that we haven't asked but you would love for us to have asked you?
No, this was a good interview. You guys asked a lot of really good questions. I'm eager to have additional input from those people that can help to harden the standards. So my leaving parting words would be to get involved in the standards development work. It doesn't sound like it would be sexy and fun, but there's a lot of detailed information that is to be worked out. And I've found a lot of really passionate people in this space that want to be able to advocate their position. And every time they do, they make the standards stronger. So I really encourage people to be able to take an hour out of their month, participate in one of Ileana's working groups or one of my working groups or one of the other working groups that happen with Jocko or any of the other experts that are in the ASTM panel. And we would certainly welcome your inputs.
Thank you, Michael. And for our listeners, I want to have them stay tuned because we will have more information for them about the standardization initiative of ASTM to develop standards for digital information in the supply chains. Michael, keep doing fantastic work. Keep doing inspirational work, inspiring a lot of other innovations. We look forward to a lot of future conversations with us and others. Reflecting on our conversation with Michael, what truly excites me is the revelation that radical innovation can often stem from a seemingly simple solution, just like the Transportation Unit Identifier, which once applied can act as a vital connective issue in the entire supply chain industry.
Indeed, TUID stands as a pivotal innovation with vast potential to revolutionize transparency and efficiency within supply chain and logistics. So what resonated most with you? We value your insights.
We invite you to share your reflections and suggestions with us via voice message. Your engagement serves as a driving force behind our passion to delve deeper into the dynamic realms of supply chain and bring you more enlightening discussions.
So stay connected with us by subscribing to the Beyond Visibility Lounge podcast on your preferred platform. The Beyond Visibility Lounge is proudly produced by the OpenSolve Studio in collaboration with TraceChain.
And lastly, if you like this episode and know someone equally passionate about the topic as yourself, share the link. You may be the reason behind the next radical innovation.